it was one of those things that just like lit a fire under me to, okay, well, I gotta learn to walk again. Now I gotta learn to ride a bike, which was not easy.
Hello and welcome back to the Odd Tandem. Our guest today is a Hall of Fame and world champion Xterra athlete, and after a battle with cancer, she is now a world and Paralympic champion on both the road and track as a C3 competitor. Jens, every once in a while we have amazing guests, but the energy and the competitiveness of our guest today was exemplary. What do you think?
You took the words right out of my mouth. That was the two things I also noticed immediately. How much energy she is having and how open and freely she talked about this life-threatening struggle she had, in her experience with fighting cancer, how long it took her to come back, to learn to walk again, to learn to ride a bike again. And now she's a Paralympic athlete. It's a fantastic journey, and I'm so glad we could be part of it, and she explained us the entire journey.
So sit back, relax, and listen to our great interview with Jamie Whitmore. All right, Jamie Whitmore, welcome to the Odd Tandem.
Thanks for having me.
Well, you've been a little bit busy. Can you actually tell us where you've been or where you just got back from? Because it sounded pretty interesting.
I've been gone for 6 weeks. I started in Mallorca for a training camp, went over to Paris for the Paralympics. Then it was off to Normandy with my family, Engelberg, and then Zurich, Switzerland for the World Championships, and then the White House.
That's what I want to hear about. Tell me about the White House visit.
This is my second time going with Team USA. I missed the year Tokyo because we were racing. They did a combined summer winter sports Team USA thing. So I would say it was a pretty epic experience. It was a lot better than what I remember from Rio, where they came in and you did an athlete summit. I missed that day because I was still racing in Zurich. And then the next day we woke up, went to the White House. You get a nice, cool tour of the White House where you see different aspects of it and hang out with your fellow Olympians and Paralympians. And then they funnel us onto these bleachers. They bring out the president. He had a pretty funny speech. And then afterwards, I think he was just going to shake a few people's hands. And he ended up spending so much time like taking selfies with us, shaking our hands and talking, that it was pretty cool. I got my presidential selfie with him.
And I believe it's for every American a special honor to go to the White House, right? I mean, me from Europe, I'm not sure if actually our government does it to invite the Olympics or the Olympic athletes into the Bundestag, but it's a pretty special occasion, isn't it?
Yeah, I feel like no matter what political party you affiliate with or whatever, that it's the greatest honor to be able to go and meet the sitting president and just see the White House. I mean, it's no Buckingham Palace or Versailles with all the gold and stuff, but it's still one of those like just pieces of our history. And then again, how many people get to take a selfie with the president?
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I got to go to the 2004 Olympics, and I must have missed that whole trip to the White House thing. But yeah, I mean, so you're just back from Zurich, where you earned two medals, a silver in the time trial and a bronze in the road race. Tell us about that experience.
This was the second time that paracycling has been integrated with able-bodied cycling. We did Glasgow last year, which was the Super Worlds, though. So you had all these different disciplines. And we kind of felt like we were the redheaded stepchild, that they stuck us way in this corner, had nothing to do with road or anything. And going to Zurich this year, where the finish line was the exact same finish line for everyone, and then we just had different starting points, I feel that the UCI did the best kind of coverage and integration that I've seen since I've been in the sport for 12 years. And it was really cool to be able to see the juniors, which is kind of the future of cycling, along with all of the elites like Chloe and Kristen Faulkner, like to be able to just see them in passing, or their awards was right before ours. That was it's just one of the cool things and solidifies the growth of paracycling and where we are. Like, we're not a participation sport. We are just as competitive as our able-bodied counterparts. We just have disabilities.
Before we actually go further into how do you get there about your history, we got this little quick fire question thing. 4 questions and you have to pick one of them. Okay?
Okay.
TT or road race?
Road race.
TV night or night out?
TV night.
Road cycling or track cycling?
Road cycling.
Xterra or cycling?
Xterra.
That was a clear answer.
Well, we're going to get to that a little bit later. But can you just kind of clear up for our viewers and our listeners the different categories of paracycling and maybe fill us in a little bit so that we know exactly what we're talking about here?
Okay, yeah. So for paracycling, there are 13 men's categories and women's. We have the trike category, which has 2, and that's where you ride this 3-wheeled upright bike. So it's kind of like a recumbent, but it's the height is like mine, and then there's 2 wheels in the back. Then you have the tandems, and that is where the stoker is visually impaired, and then the pilot, it can fully see, which I hope, because they're leading the train. Then you have 5 hand cycle categories, which is considered H. It's the 1 through 5. The 5 being the more able-bodied kneelers, where they cycle like that, and then the ones are your most disabled wheelchair athletes. Like they're always quads. Then you have 5 of the C categories, which we ride on normal bikes just like you guys, but we might have different adaptations for missing a limb, cerebral palsy, or some sort of like traumatic brain injury. Someone might be missing hands. But again, the number 5, so a C5 is your most able-bodied. So they probably are missing their hand or an arm. And then your C1 is your most disabled and generally has multiple things. So they might be missing like an arm and a leg, or have some sort of paralysis in there, but they can still ride an upright. So I'm a C3. I'm smack dab in the middle, where my left leg is impaired. I have a left leg, but it's so impaired that it just puts me into that category. I'm missing a glute and a hamstring.
Ooh, and well, then I guess the next logic question would be, you were an Xterra athlete before in the Hall of Fame, and now how do you get here? How was the travel or the adventure to get to this point here now? How did it go? What happened to our viewers and listeners?
So I was competing for about 8 years as a professional Xterra athlete, which is offroad triathlons, and also a mountain biker. I did do that, but I only made my way up to like 5th in the nation. And in 2007 at our world championships, I noticed something was wrong with my leg. And so over the next 6 months, it was trying to figure out what was causing me excruciating pain in my leg, because it continued to get worse. Turns out it was called a spindle cell sarcoma, which was growing out of my sciatic nerve. Most people know sarcomas as osteosarcomas, which are in your bone. Well, mine was in my nerve. So I can't even describe the pain. If you were to ask me on a scale of 1 to 10, it was a 20. And when they removed the tumor, they had to remove a section of my sciatic nerve, which you need your sciatic nerve to control your foot. It's what makes your foot move and your leg. When they removed that, I have had a condition what's called drop foot, which meant everything below my knee was paralyzed. I had no hamstring, and then the tumor came back. I had another surgery, and they removed my entire glute muscle. So most of my left leg doesn't work, but I'm lucky because my knee can still bend, and I still have like 3/4 of my quad functioning. So I can in the pedal stroke, if you think about your normal leg where all your muscles engage if you're pedaling correctly, I only have part of my quad on the left leg. So it doesn't always engage. So if you watch me, I have this little waddle. But when I learned of all of this, I learned I would never run again. Swimming, my foot just kind of drags. So naturally gravitating towards cycling, which I just have such a love for mountain biking, that was where I began to excel again and found my second career for the Paralympics.
And I mean, that's got to be a hard transition going from an able-bodied athlete and then having something like this happen. How was that transition for you?
I think any transition where, yes, you were this full blown, healthy, just everything worked fine kind of athlete, right? At the highest level that you could be. I had ambitions to win like 50 championship races, more world championship races. To have that cut short, to have cancer kind of dictate, no, you're never gonna do this kind of racing again, was in and of itself a very hard thing. But I'm also a person that will look at where's the positive, what can I still do? So learning that there could be this second possibility to be a Paralympic athlete, right? That others had paved the way for people with disabilities, that I could have a second chance, essentially. It was one of those things that just like lit a fire under me to, okay, well, I gotta learn to walk again. Now I gotta learn to ride a bike, which was not easy I knew how I used to ride, and then now to ride, it was kind of frustrating, but at the same time, it was like freedom. I am riding a bike. I am doing this on my own when I had been so confined to not being able to run anymore, having to learn to walk with a walker and then a cane, that there were these freedoms and type of independence that I got back when I ride a bike. Like, I don't feel as disabled when I ride a bike as I do when I'm just everyday walking.
Somewhere in the middle of all that happening, you also became a mother of twin boys, I believe. How did that go? Was it like, yeah, this is so awesome, and like that was some light at the tunnel, or was it planned, if I'm allowed to ask, or did it help you to transition and go, hey, there's another purpose in my life. I'm a mother now?
Well, so if you know the whole story of how things went down, no, I was incredibly terrified to find out I was pregnant. It was not planned. I was going in for a third surgery to have my kidney moved to auto transplanted. Yeah, so here's the deal. I lived through two cancer surgeries, but then I got sepsis after the second one, and I had a bone infection. I had all these issues from complications and was living with this drain out of my kidney. And then it was finally time to get that drain out so I could ride a bike again, right? That was always my thing, is I wanted to get back on a bike. And right before that surgery, I had one last hurrah, because we knew for some reason every time I had surgeries, I'd be like laid up for months. And so it was this one last hurrah. I go in for surgery, and it must have been, I think it was like 2 weeks after that surgery, I started feeling kind of awful. But I didn't have a fever or anything. And then 2 more weeks passed, and I still was just like no energy. It was hard to hold food down. So the doctors began to worry that maybe my kidney, something was wrong with the location, because it was in my right pelvic area now. So I went into an ER expecting to hear like the worst. Your cancer's back, it's spread to your stomach, or like all these weird things, or no, your kidney can't be here, we got to remove it again. And the ER doc comes into me after I was there for like 13 hours, and I was not kind at this point because I was just frustrated with life. And she says, we know what's wrong with you. And I looked at her like, what? And she says, you're pregnant. And I looked back at her and said, how? Because it had completely escaped that I had this one-time hurrah with my husband. And she looks at me like, do I really need to explain this to you? And I said, no, you need to test me again. This can't be possible. So they tested me again, and she says, no, you're still pregnant. But then we realized I had been probably 3 days pregnant during my surgery. I had x-rays, I was on medications, so they had to go now test and make sure it was a viable pregnancy. And when they were doing the ultrasound, I really didn't know what I wanted to hear because I was just terrified. I hadn't even been a year cancer free. I hadn't really adjusted to being disabled at this point. And now you're telling me like I'm going to be a mom. I just want to ride my bike again. And so I go in and they're doing an ultrasound and I was all by myself because they wouldn't let anybody else be in there. And the guy looks at me and says, "Oh, yeah, no, it's a viable pregnancy. And by the way, you're having twins." And I died. Like I died. I was just like, that's it. I'm not trying to get on a bike anymore. And I'm a person of huge faith. So I basically looked at God and said, you're really funny. And now I've learned I'll get back on the bike when he wants me to get back on the bike. So then it was a series of like being pregnant and having complications and then having twins and not knowing what the heck I was doing.
So, yeah, that's a lot to take in at one time, and you obviously passed that test. But I've heard you say cycling, like you wanted to get back on the bicycle. So, what do you think drove you to get back on the bike? And then you had so many disciplines. You've been a rider on the track, on the road. You said that you love mountain biking. As an able-bodied athlete, I have the same feeling. Like, I want to ride my bike. When things are going a little sour, like I go out on a bike ride and I feel a little bit better. But yeah, what was it for you that just drove you to cycling?
Well, I mean, my passion has always been cycling and running. Like I grew up, or through all of high school, I was a collegiate runner, and I loved the feel of the wind and the smells of the outdoor, and especially say mountain biking and trail running. It's like the smell of pines and the dirt when the mist and the dew happen in the morning. I mean, those are all, and it's peaceful, it's quiet because I would usually be riding or running so early in the morning. And when running was taken away, I didn't want to dwell on what I couldn't do anymore. So there was this drive to, well, I'm going to ride again. I also have to tell you, my nerve doctor had said, well, maybe you'll ride a stationary bike. And that wasn't good enough for me. I didn't want to be confined to some indoor bike unless I had to. And so it was trying to prove that doctor wrong of, oh no, I'll show you, I'm going to be a mountain biker again. But there's a feeling when you're on the road, it's like you can just check out and you can ride. I mean, as long as it's safe. I still have to watch for cars and stuff. But when you're mountain biking, it's also this sense of accomplishment of clearing a rock garden or coming off of a drop. And that was always my measure of how well I was doing when I was a pro mountain biker, was did I clear this section? Because that's the oddity of mountain biking, is you can ride the same thing 5 times and one time you don't make it, or one time you do and the other 4 times you kind of fail that section. And so there's this measure of success that I was always driven by. And I just love it. I love being outdoors. And the thought of, it took 3 years. So from the day I was diagnosed with cancer until I finally rode again, it was 3 years. And I will tell you one thing. When I raced as a pro, there were days that it was sometimes hard to train. Like you're just like, oh, I got to do that workout today. And I dreaded it. The day that I started riding again in 2011, I have never had a day that I didn't want to be out on my bike. Even if I didn't like the workout. It was one of those, what the great Bill Walton always said, I get to ride my bike today. And I've never forgotten that. For 12 years, every day it's, I get to ride my bike today. So.
Yeah, I had the honor to know Bill as well. He was a great guy. Huh? I liked him. His wisdom, how he was like easy with his life. Happy that I had the chance to know him. On the way back to the bike, was your first bike a stationary bike, I suppose? And then you went on one of them tricycles. And did it feel like a victory to you when you finally got, okay, I'm back on a normal 2-wheel bike? How was that feeling the first day back on that bike, out there on the road in the wilderness?
My actual first ride back, once I got an AFO, which is an ankle foot orthotic. It was something that would allow my foot to be able to push down on the pedal because it made my legs stiff enough. when the first ride I actually did was on the back of a tandem with my ex-husband. And that was, oh my gosh. I remember when he showed up from work, because I had to wait for him. I had just gotten that AFO. I put, like, if you knew me from Xterra, I used to have these race braids. I had race braids on. I put my Michelin jersey on. I was fully kitted up, had my helmet, and I was waiting. So he busts out the tandem. I got on the back. And he said, we're just going to go out for like 20 minutes. And I said, oh no, we're riding for an hour. and we did. I hadn't ridden for 3 years, and we went and rode for a full hour. And it was, the best way to explain it was freedom. I mean, it was, I just didn't feel confined. I had the feel of fresh air again, and I was riding, and I had the hugest smile, and you couldn't wipe that smile off. 2 days later, I went on my very own solo mountain bike ride, and I had 3 friends that came along, and that was in and of itself an experience. I didn't fall over on downhills. I fell over on uphills because I was just so weak, and I didn't have the ability to navigate over certain technical things that I used to. And so all of a sudden I'd just fall over, and then I would be stuck in on my left side, and someone would have to come over and snap my foot out. They'd run the bike up for me. I'd drag my leg, and then they'd help me get back on, and I'd ride. And I rode for like 2 hours that day, and it was amazing. And after that, there was no stopping me. Like I learned that mountain biking, I always have to be with someone, because if I do fall over, I can get stuck. And so someone needs to be there to just kind of help me unclip my leg. But I mean, I do solo rides all the time on the road, and I'm totally fine.
So it started with mountain biking, and then obviously progressed to the road, and then to track. I mean, those are 3 different disciplines. Tell me a little bit about the transition from one to the next, and do you prefer one over the other, actually?
I'd say, so the transition to road was pretty easy, right? I loved that a lot because I didn't need anyone to be with me. The transition to track was flippin' terrifying. And my coach, Neil Henderson, the first time I got on the track, you have to understand, was Carson, LA. So if you've never been there, to me, it's one of the hardest tracks. It's like shaped like a hot dog, and it's like death-defyingly straight up. And I showed up in 2000 and was it 13 to nationals, and Neil Henderson was there, and he kept saying, Jamie, you race professional mountain biking. This is nothing compared to that. And I looked at him and said, mountain bikes have brakes. There's no brakes, and it's a fixed gear. Like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I remember literally shaking. But then I somehow miraculously raced, earned a spot onto the world's team going to 2014, and Andy Sparks had come in and taken over our program, and he was fantastic. Like, he really taught me how to be confident on the track, what to do. And I think on Carson would get nervous, but I honestly tried to hone in on those mountain bike skills, and I would always tell myself, you race mountain bikes, you can do this. But as for which one do I like, each one has like this special uniqueness about it. Like, racing the track is hard. It's scary being in the gates and not wanting to screw anything up when you come out. But at the same time, being able to race as hard as you can, as fast as you can for less than a minute race or a 4-minute race is so cool. And it feels neat. Like, just feeling that wind when you're all tucked into your aero position with your aero helmet. I love that feeling. And then road racing I love because it's that combination between playing chess and poker, where you're trying to pretend like you don't hurt when you really do, trying to anticipate what others are going to do. And it's not always about who the best racer is, it's who's the smartest racer is that day. And then mountain biking, I just love because it's challenging. You can ride the same trail 5 days in a row, and you'll find some new aspect of it. So, I would say true and true though, mountain biking is my favorite because there's no cars.
Yep, I can totally agree to that. No cars makes it a lot more relaxed. Hey, maybe I go a little more specific for our viewers and listeners. At the last Olympics in Paris, how long was your racing distance on the road, and how long is a typical race for you on the track for your category? Is it in minutes or 1 mile or 3 or 4 or 1 kilometer? How long is your racing?
So for my category, we're just under 4 minutes in the 3K pursuit. And then the 500 is generally right around 40 seconds. For the road race, this is where we kind of get gypped, where I feel like UCI doesn't understand what we're capable of. Like, just because we have disabilities doesn't mean we aren't capable of doing more. And so it's only like a 9-mile race. We used to have a lot more 12-mile time trials, and now they've been cutting us short, and it's between 9 and 10. But I will say in Paris, they did give us a nice technical one. So that made up for dogging us in distances. And then the road races, this is again where it sucks. I feel like it should be more about your fitness and endurance when it comes to a road race, and we should never have less than a 2.5 hour race. And I swear most of our races are like an hour and a half. They're 30 miles long. And to me, that's not a true test of who an endurance athlete is. And they definitely should be technical with hills always. So I'd say we definitely got gypped there again too. And the same thing happened in Zurich. I watched all the elites get to do this awesome like uphill climb and then this gnarly descent, which, hello, mountain biker here, I would have loved that. And then they put us on this out and back that just went along the river and was 9 miles long. So yeah, our TTs can be anywhere from 20 minutes to 30 minutes to give you perspective. It's not very long.
So how can we change that? What would it take for the Paralympic athletes to be happy with the distances? It sounds like they're kind of dictating what you do, and you say that you can do more. So what can the athletes do to change that?
Well, I think, so I became a U.S. Rep to try and find that out more. Like, how do we start being the voice of athletes and talking? And we have two UCI athlete reps, but I feel like athlete reps it doesn't mean anything. It's more of, they tell you, yes, you have this position and you have a voice, but you don't. I don't know, because when I sat in a room for the first time in Belgium at our World Cup this year, we did an athlete meeting, and I heard more and more athletes of all different disciplines complaining about the same thing of, we want harder courses, we want longer courses. And so we're trying to figure out how to organize, like essentially to have a union and be able to speak out to UCI. But I think UCI is like, well, we already have all these disciplines, so I don't know, for lack of a better word, we just don't care, or it's not going to happen because their focus is elite. And so I don't know. It's maybe people who have names, like well-known names, kind of speaking up and helping to push this movement, or maybe it's requiring that UCI have more athlete people on their board, more former athletes that will take the time to listen to what we would like.
And you would think you need to address that to the UCI or to the Olympic Committee?
Yeah, the IPC, the International Paralympic Committee. I think it's a combination of both. I don't know. I just think right now it's run by so many people that aren't, especially when it comes to like Paralympics, it's being run by able-bodied people that don't understand. They don't understand what we're capable of. It's the same with classification, which is, dare I even say it, that's a whole new bottle of worms that I'm not sure we have time to even open up on here. But if you've had other Paralympic athletes, like, you'll know. But there's just this issue where you have a lot of able-bodied people dictating what we do. And it's even running our programs. It's a lot of able-bodied people, and they don't understand what we're capable of. And I think on the flip side, it's hard for them to argue with others about what we can do and can't do, because then they'll just say, well, you don't know. You know what I mean? But I am starting to see other countries have more people with disabilities and former athletes running their programs. And I think that makes their program more successful, because they know. Like they know what each category represents. So I think we just keep speaking out.
That's all you can do. But again, mountain biking seems to be like a mega passion of yours, and there's no category for this in the Paralympics. Do you think there's a pathway for mountain biking to be included in future games?
I talked with a former mountain bike competitor of mine who does work for the UCI, and she was like, "Oh yeah, I doubt mountain biking will ever happen, but maybe gravel racing might happen." I think the tricky part about mountain biking is that if you're looking at all the disciplines, two-wheelers love single track. And I am a two-wheeler. I love my single track. I don't like, wide open gravel roads. I want all the technical aspects of that. But to put a three-wheeler on a mountain bike, they would need more gravel type racing. Like they can't be on the same single track that a two-wheeler can. So I think it does pose complications of if we just have everything open gravel, it's not fun for the two-wheelers. But if you only do single track, then it's not accessible to the three-wheelers. So we'd be dealing with those issues. So, and I think UCI knows that. And so it's like, let's just stick to, if we're going to introduce something, let's just do gravel. It'd be easier.
And just to the point you mentioned before, we had Sarah Story at the Paris Olympics saying, "Hey, look, you shorten our races, and that's not fair." And just like you said, she felt like that parasport or women's parasport is a little bit, we think about it when we have time. It's, and there should be a little more attention or respect for that. That para athletes, like you just said, they are able to do actually a little longer distances than people might think. So she was right there in what you just said.
Yeah, and we've had extensive talks as well about this. And I would say women in para, yes, are even at more of a disadvantage. It's like these organizations say your sport needs to grow, right? If you want more, but then they don't give the room for the growth. And I'll give you an example. I started racing 12 years ago. My first Paralympics was Rio. We were allowed 70 women's cyclists into all of the Paralympics. There are 13 categories, and we'll just say a few of them are combined. Again, that's a whole more complicated process. But only allowing 70 athletes in, female athletes, doesn't even cover 10 per category. Now you have to look at there's 4 races that they can do. 2 on the track, 2 on the road. Not everybody does all 4 events, right? Like a trike rider can only do 2 events. Hand cycles can only do 2. So two-wheelers are the only ones that are offered 4 events. But then hand cycles can kind of do the relay. But the point being, 70 women. Do you want to know how much they increased that for Tokyo and Paris? 10 women. So we were allowed 80 women athletes. That still doesn't cover 10 per category. If you want the sport to grow, you have to allow more women to compete. And so that's where it starts. Start letting more people in. Start letting the courses be more difficult. Let the courses be longer. But it's like, listen to us. Don't just do your, how UCI is. They're all about their rules. They're all about their measurements. And then, you need to fit in this box. And para doesn't. Let us have seats at the table and start to, push for more. That's all I'm asking. If you got to hire more, then fine. Charge us more to have, more entry fees or something that will allow more participants. I don't know. I don't have the answer because I don't know what the holdup is, right? Why doesn't UCI want us to grow more? Why aren't they allowing us 150 athletes and allowing 200 men athletes? I don't know. When we don't know these things. Yeah.
Just a quick comment before Bobby asks the next question. Me as a father of 6, I feel like you with the school system here in Germany. People running the school system, I'm 53, they are at least 20 years older than me. They haven't seen a school from the inside for 50 years. And they tell me how the school for my kids should be? Well, what do they know? right? And that's what UCI also needs to do, have more young people, more ex-athletes, and more para-athletes. So they actually talk to the real source of information, to the people they are within that problem, and then they can say, hey, look, I think this and this is what we need. And then UCI can say, okay, this is possible, this is maybe, but this we cannot do. But at least, right, have better communications, right? And that's how I feel with our school system here as well. And I think I can feel your frustration. But Bobby, back to you and your next question.
Yeah. One of my, we've done a prior podcast, and Meg Fisher referred to able-bodied athletes as people that have leg doping, right? Like they've got two legs.
I
leg
remember
doping.
that.
It was one of my favorite things that I've ever heard on a podcast. But when you're preparing for a world championship, Olympics, what sort of like technical advances are you looking at compared to able-bodied athletes, or is it pretty?
I would say for me, it's the same because I'm on a two-wheel bike. I do wear an AFO on my leg. If you've ever seen any pictures of it, that allows that leg to be able to pedal. Now it's not super aerodynamic. So I'd say that's kind of the thing where I'm hindered versus a person that doesn't need to wear one. So I try to create different ways to cover that with like velo toes and have that go all along there. I would say all of the electronic shifting and things that we have now, the disc brakes, those are all advances that probably have benefited para athletes more than they've benefited able-bodied athletes, because you look at someone who maybe has like one digit, right? They've got this one finger and that's all they have. Having accessibility to disc brakes or a splitter or electronic shifting has now made it to where they're not at a disadvantage to someone who has full hand grip. So, but hand cycles, and you'd have to talk to someone in a hand cycle, but I do listen a lot. They've had huge advances in, say, wheel size, running really tiny wheels. I think they're like 24s in the back versus 700s, what they used to run. And also just the designs of their hand cycles have changed over the years and gotten better. And now I think what's in debate is, will they allow kneelers? Is UCI going to allow the kneeler category going into next year, which is H5s? Or are they going to make everybody just run lay down bikes and be done with it? I mean, that's what we're all kind of waiting to see, is if it's going to happen or not. And then trike riders would be the other one that I think there needs to be something. That category is for people who have like balance issues. I don't understand why they're on such an upright bike instead of being on a three-wheeler recumbent bike. You know what I mean? It just seems so much safer for them to race something lower to the ground when they're the ones with the most balance issues. So I don't know if that'll ever change.
So when you talk about all these different categories and special needs on the equipment, disc brakes, electronic shifting, and training camps, how is the financial situation of the U.S. Federation for this? And do you have private sponsors? Does your husband help? Family helps? Or how do you get along with all that? Because, I mean, your bike is probably at least as expensive as the bikes we used to have. So,
Right.
How is all that working out for you? You're a member of a team, of a sports club, or you're privateer? Or how is that organized in your life?
So for me, coming from being a pro, right, I had relationships with all my pro sponsors. And so moving into the Paralympic world, I still had those ties. Jim Felt is a very good friend of mine. And he and then Andy Sparks connected me with what was 2016 back then, Nicola Cranmer. And I've been working with their team. So I'm very blessed in my path to the Paralympics and having just all those connections with my former sponsors. For those that don't, one of the main places you could go would be the Challenged Athletes Foundation, which is just a fantastic organization that helps anyone with disabilities. You don't even have to be pro. And they're going to help you get the equipment that is needed, because hand cycle bikes are one-offs and they are so much more money, I think, than a lot of like the bikes that I can get my hands on. So, I mean, upwards of like $10,000 if they're going to get carbon hand cycle bikes. So they often rely on that. There are a few other teams like Team Possibilities and a few others that are like para-based. I think Challenge Athletes Foundation actually does have one of the only female hand cycle teams. And so they get help there. Otherwise, no, you're on your own and you're footing the bill yourself. You're applying for what little grants are out there. And then my goal is to like never use my husband's, never use our family income to pay for my stuff. It's finding those resources. I know my brace company, my AFO, they help with money on the side that helps me get to races and pay for like plane tickets and things like that. But it's hard. Like we don't have anywhere near the recognition or accessibility to having help that say I used to have as a pro athlete. And that's where it's kind of sad. And I think every Paralympic year sponsors step up. Like I'll totally say Toyota was huge. Toyota helped sponsor or help donated money to every Paralympic athlete that made the team. And those are so crucial to helping us get what is needed to continue to further us to be the athlete that we can be, that we know we can be.
And is it true that you're also a coach yourself? I mean, you mentioned Neil Henderson. Everybody knows Neil Henderson. Are you actually a coach yourself as well?
So yes, for a very long time, I was coaching triathletes and mountain bikers, and I started to step away to focus on parenting again and being, or not parenting again, but like focusing more on my kids. So then I've now gravitated towards coaching kids. And right now it's 100% volunteer basis. Like I have coached my kids' cross country team for the last like 4 years. I coach soccer, which I know very little about soccer, but I have such a passion for kids to be active that's I just want to see kids playing, like kids going out there and riding. And I take kids out and I go and I ride, and I don't know. I need to get back into the world of like making money coaching, but at the same time, I don't ever want someone to not have access to being a better athlete and learning what I can teach them just because they don't have the funding. So, we'll see where I go next year.
And your own children, are they sporty in any kind? They do soccer, they follow your cycling, your Xterra, or they just happy to be a couch potato?
So I would say my twins have always been super active. They both have grown up snowboarding, but Christian loves snowboarding, and Ryder's now gravitated a little bit more towards just downhill skiing, but they do it for fun. And then running. So funny story about running. Ryder has always been like I gung-ho rider, running. And then Christian, I had to bribe. He hated running. But I didn't want to come pick one of them up. I was like, you're both doing sports. So they did that. They wrestled for a little while. They did jiu-jitsu for a few years. And my son would always say, Mom, Christian, this is Christian. Not everybody is as competitive as you. I was like, oh, okay. Because I would always just be like, you could be so fast. And he just fought me tooth and nail. And now as a high schooler, Christian, like he's running like low 18s and actually went sub 17 in a 3-mile race. And it's fun to see him like really starting to find his groove in running, the kid who fought me on it and was like, well, I'm just going to practice. I don't want to race. And then my other son, Ryder, still loves running, but he's little. He's not even 5 foot yet. But he's a huge comp soccer player and loves that. And then they both do ride. But Christian loves mountain biking and Ryder loves road riding, but they don't want to race. They just like to ride with me, so I don't push that. I was like, okay. And then Ryder, I'm trying to get into Nordic skiing because I think he'd be really good cross-country skier. But, and he also loves track and field and is really, really good at high jump and hurdles. Like I'm already noticing very good technique. But at 5 foot, he's got to grow some more. So we'll see.
I got to ask this question. Where did this competitiveness in you come from? I'm, you can hear it in your voice. So, like, where's the origin of that competitive spirit?
I don't know except that my dad's side of the family, I remember growing up with them, and Christmas time and Thanksgiving and every holiday that we got together, we played board games, right? We're talking Pictionary, Claim to Fame, Mexican Dominoes, and it was like heated. We would be arguing. I had these twin uncles, I had an aunt, and then my grandma and grandpa, and then it was my sister and myself and my dad. And so we would split into teams and we tried to make them as even as possible, but there were arguments and nobody liked losing. And there was just this competitiveness. I mean, my dad, when we would play, we would even play, like, let's just say thumb wars. My dad's hand is like 3 times the size of mine, and he would just crush me all the time, like just pin my thumb down and would never let me win anything, whatever it was. So I don't know if he saw in me this kid that was just super competitive, that he just fostered that by like never letting me win or what. But as long as I've known myself, there's always been this desire to be the best that I could be. And I measured myself to others to be better, right? Does that make sense? Where it wasn't like detrimental to me where, oh, I lost, I must suck. It was never like that. It was, oh, she was 10 seconds better than me. Where can I gain 10 seconds? And it was always analyzing a race. Where could I pick it up? If I just pick up 2 seconds per mile, that'll get me closer to her. So it was always this analytical thing. And I think the hardest thing about getting older as an athlete is that the gains are so small now. I mean, I'm in my 40s. And so I'm watching these 20-year-olds that are, 10 seconds behind me. And I'm going, oh gosh, give her 2 years and she's going to be in front of me because she's got the room to make these gains and I don't anymore. So I don't know. I love being competitive, but sometimes I just got to tone it down because as my son says, Mom, not everybody's competitive.
So with that competitive spirit, where is your competitive future with this? How much longer you want to be an active athlete? Or at what point you think, maybe I'll be a full-time coach now or whatever, a full-time mom, or whatever is your desire for the future? Is there any plans for that?
I tell people I hang around as long as I'm relevant. So I know my days of being a world champion aren't there, but there's still that room where I still make the podium? Can I be that 50-year-old that still makes the podium, that shows these younger gals like I've still got a little bit? And I think as long as that's there, I'll stick around. As long as I can mentor and I can be a veteran. And I also, if everybody just keeps retiring in my category, then that, para's like that unique thing where you actually have to have a disability. It's not like able-bodied where anybody can do it. You have to have that type of disability to fit into that category. So it's harder to keep the depth in our categories. So I kind of feel an obligation to continue to be there to validate, we've got 15 girls now racing instead of like only 5 because everybody quits or retires. But yeah, I mean, I definitely know I'm over that hump. I'd love to see if I could make it to 50. When I first started Xterra, Ned Overin, like he was one of the people that really said, Jamie, you have a future in Xterra, you should do this. And we became friends. And I told myself back then at the ripe old age of like 27 that I wanted to still be racing at 50. So I for sure have 2 more years in me.
Well, then that only is 1 more year to go for the next Olympics in Los Angeles, isn't it?
Right? Then it's like, well, then LA 2028 is like right there. Can I last another quad? I don't know, because it is mental. It's not physically draining. It's mentally draining to keep playing the game, the politics of the Olympics and Paralympics. So I told myself, let's make a goal of 2 more years and then we'll reassess in 2 more years.
That brings me back to a question I wanted to ask earlier. What is your like season? What does your program look like? Is it only surrounding the World Championships and Paralympic Games, or is there more stuff, more little stepping stones or goals that para athletes have throughout the whole season?
We have, for road, we do have a few World Cups, and then we have selection events. So in a year with a World Championships, we might have six or seven races. Now, people in my categories can often do able-bodied racing as well, whereas our hand cycle counterparts don't have as many unless they go to Europe. And then there's lots of what we say C1 events, where they can go and participate in a lot of different events. But me being a parent, it's that, see, when I was a pro, I had 0 kids. So everything was about my career, right? Like it was I ate, slept, and trained. That's all I did. And now I'm juggling 4 kids. Like my bonus daughter, as we say, she was so not athletic at all. And then, I think the desire to like connect with me, she started running. And like, she's tough as nails, let me tell you. So she went from not running at all to going into high school and running 5Ks. And she listens to everything I say. And so I want to be there for them. So a lot of my stuff, like I can't just go out and do road racing every weekend like I used to. And so I prioritize making sure I'm there for their soccer games, there for their cross-country events, and then I go and I train. So racing for me is so much smaller than what it used to be. But I'm okay with that because I'm also older, and I feel like it would just wear me out if I was racing every weekend like I used to.
Just a very last thing, just to avoid confusion with our listeners and viewers, please explain the term a bonus child one more time.
My bonus child. So I am remarried, and my husband has 2 children. So I have a stepson and a stepdaughter. And I often call them my bonus children because they're a pleasant addition to my twins. And I don't like referring to myself as like that wicked stepmother. So I'm a bonus mom.
And you've been a bonus guest. Jamie, thank you so much today for coming on The Odd Tandem, and wish you all the best moving forward. Can't wait to see what happens in 2028 if you're going to be an athlete or a coach. You never know.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to the podcast. There will be loads more content popping up here, including more great interviews with top guests like Jamie.
Keep dropping your questions for us in the comments, and check our description below to find us on social media and Patreon in order to support the channel like these great people.